We are the biggest seller of weapons to the UAE. The UAE is the biggest funder and armor of the RSF, which has been found by our State Department to have committed genocide.
So Mehdi Hasan just cornered a Democratic congresswoman about America's complicity in genocide, and she actually didn't dodge the question. This is Rep. Sarah Jacobs explaining how U.S. weapon sales to the UAE directly fuel genocide in Sudan while we ignore it. Let's break down this brutal reality.
This is the largest humanitarian and displacement crisis in the world right now. You have about 33 million Sudanese people who are in need of humanitarian assistance. Literally, people are starving. They are resorting to eating animal feed or leaves. When I met with Sudanese refugees on the border with Chad, I used to work at the UN and the State Department. I've been to my fair share of refugee camps. I've never seen kids that traumatized. And you have to remember, the people in Darfur, this is their second genocide in about 20 years.
33 million people needing aid makes this larger than Gaza and Ukraine combined, yet you barely hear about it. That's the pattern with African conflicts. The international community treats Black and Arab suffering as background noise while prioritizing European and Middle Eastern crises.
The evidence is entirely concrete. Both our own intelligence agencies and the UN and many other outside groups have very credible evidence, and there have been multiple reports showing not only have the UAE funded the RSF, but they are continuing to fund. How are they denying it when the evidence is that credible? It's wild. They've literally lied to me to my face.
The UAE spends millions lobbying Washington. They hired Trump's former campaign manager and multiple ex-officials. When a congresswoman says foreign officials lied to her face about genocide, that's not diplomatic language. That's someone calling out a systematic cover-up of mass atrocities.
And that's part of what I've been trying to get the U.S. to do, is to say we are the biggest seller of weapons to the UAE. The UAE is the biggest funder and armor of the RSF, which has been found by our State Department to have committed genocide. We need to use our leverage and stop arms sales to the UAE until we can have real credible assurance that they are not funding the RSF.
Here's the smoking gun. Our State Department officially determined the RSF committed genocide, yet we keep selling weapons to their primary backer. We sanctioned Russia for Ukraine, but give the UAE a pass for Sudan. It's not about human rights. It's about oil and geopolitical convenience.
But I actually think in many ways, by underestimating our own leverage, we're actually hurting our own national security, because other countries around the world see that we are not holding our partners and allies to the same standard that we are holding everyone else. And so I do think if we stopped sending weapons, if we did not allow the UAE to buy our weapons, if we did sanctions, the UAE would use their leverage on the RSF to actually get them to the table and get a real negotiation.
This undermines every human rights lecture America gives. When we sanction China for Xinjiang but ignore UAE genocide funding, the global South sees pure hypocrisy. Our credibility as a moral leader becomes worthless when our standards change based on who writes the checks.
It's gotten a lot worse under the Trump administration, especially with the foreign assistance cuts. There were these groups in Sudan, the emergency response rooms, ERRs, essentially mutual aid groups that had sprung up in the wake of this conflict. And the U.S. under the Biden administration had found ways for USAID to fund them directly. Now that that funding has dried up because of Donald Trump, they are no longer able to feed people. They were often the only people who were able to get into these really hard to reach areas where people are literally starving.
There were soup kitchens shut down overnight.
About 80% of their kitchens have been shut down because of the Trump administration's foreign assistance cuts.
Trump's foreign aid cuts are killing people in real time. Those emergency kitchens were the difference between life and starvation for thousands. Meanwhile, he wants to spend billions on mass deportation. The moral bankruptcy of cutting food aid while funding detention camps is staggering.
And, what I'm told is that the Biden administration felt like they needed the UAE's partnership on other things in the Middle East, particularly on the issue in Israel and Gaza. And they were unwilling to actually put this real leverage on. But frankly, I am incredibly angry at the Biden administration that they didn't use the leverage that we have to end this war before we even got to here.
Biden sacrificed Sudanese lives for Middle East partnerships. The administration needed UAE cooperation on Israel-Gaza, so they ignored genocide in Africa. This transactional approach to human rights shows why American moral leadership rings hollow across much of the developing world.
So here's how I think about it. So I used to work in genocide prevention, and genocide is a technical legal determination. And so I have decided in my time in Congress to only call something a genocide once there's been a finding of genocide by either our State Department or the ICJ, which has happened in Sudan and has not yet happened in Israel. Now, do I think it is very likely a genocide happened in Gaza? Yes. Do I think what's happening is horrific and horrible and war crimes have been committed? Yes.
This is intellectual honesty from someone who actually worked in genocide prevention. She's setting a legal standard rather than making political statements. It's refreshing to hear a politician acknowledge nuance on Gaza while still calling out actual legally determined genocide in Sudan.
Israel, they get free healthcare there. We don't have free healthcare here. Like, we should be spending the $4 billion we send them to do that here. However, I don't think we should prevent them from buying Iron Dome interceptors, because I don't think, just like I don't think Palestinian civilians should be punished for the actions of the people in charge, I don't think Iranian civilians should be punished for the actions of the people in charge, I don't think Israeli civilians should be punished for the actions of the people in charge of them.
Her family gets Israeli healthcare while Americans die from rationing insulin. That personal connection makes her critique more powerful. She's not anti-Israel, she's pro-consistency. Defending civilian lives shouldn't depend on nationality, and our aid priorities should reflect our own needs first.
I have been so angry at both the Trump administration and many mainstream organizations weaponizing Jewish pain and the very real rise in anti-Semitism to accomplish their political goals that actually have nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And I feel very strongly that we need to be very clear about what is legitimate criticism of the policies of the government of Israel and what is anti-Semitism.
As a Jewish congresswoman, she has unique credibility here. Bad faith accusations of anti-Semitism have become a shield against legitimate policy criticism. When Jewish voices are silenced by claims they're self-hating, it shows how weaponized these accusations have become for political gain.
And I would argue Bibi Netanyahu has a large role to play in that rise in anti-Semitism. And they are the president, the people around the president, who are like literally Nazis.
Netanyahu's authoritarian rhetoric and Trump's dinner with Nick Fuentes create the very anti-Semitic environment they claim to fight. It's grimly ironic. The people shouting loudest about protecting Jewish safety are enabling the actual Nazis who threaten Jewish communities worldwide.
I mean, it's hard to say because my Republican colleagues often will tell me something crosses a red line and then not do anything about it. But I do think the president's tweet literally threatening genocide against the Iranian people is, I'm hopeful, a bridge too far for many of my Republican colleagues, and they will vote with us.
Trump literally tweeted about obliterating Iran's population. That's textbook genocide incitement. We've normalized threats of mass civilian murder from a sitting president. The bar has fallen so low that explicit genocide threats might finally be too much for some Republicans.
I think the Democratic Party needs to be very clear that this military adventurism is wrong and doesn't help Americans. And frankly, I think that this has been a sort of bipartisan foreign policy establishment consensus for a long time, that the U.S. is this like global hegemon and that we need to be doing everything we can to maintain that hegemony. And I actually think that what makes more sense is to recognize that we're in a multipolar world, try and figure out what kind of multipolar world we want, and then work to build that multipolar world, which means working more with partners and allies. It means holding all of our partners and allies to very high values and standards because we know that those values and standards actually protect us.
Yes.
She's describing the end of American hegemony, not as defeat, but as strategic evolution. Principled multilateralism builds stronger coalitions than hypocritical dominance. When allies trust your consistency on human rights, they're more likely to support you when it matters most.
I talk to leaders in the global south all the time, and they frequently will say, like, you won't sell us a weapon because we've committed a human rights abuse. And frankly, I agree, we shouldn't have sold them those weapons. But then you go and you fund the UAE, you send weapons to Israel, like, what? Like,
double standard.
Global South leaders see this hypocrisy daily. We lecture them about democracy while funding autocrats who serve our interests. This double standard doesn't just hurt our moral standing, it drives countries toward China and Russia who don't pretend to care about human rights.